Namaste friends, welcome to another episode of the Essence of the Bhagavad Gita. We are still in chapter 3 of the Gita, and in today's episode we are going to be looking at verse 38 of chapter 3. I think the last week we looked at verse 35. We are still in the same section. And as always, I'm first going to read the verse for you in Sanskrit. Dhumena vriyate vhannir yatadarsho malena cha yatol bhenavruto garbhastata tene dadavamamritam. And now I'll read the literal translation of the verse for you as written by Swami Kriyananda. As fire obscured by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, as an embryo is enveloped by the womb, so is human understanding obscured by the three qualities. Now, for those of you who have any familiarity with the Bhagavad Gita, perhaps you have heard this verse before because it is one of those pivotal verses that are the principal teachings of the Gita that Krishna is giving Arjuna and is giving to all of us. Now, even before I dive into this verse, I want to see it in context in chapter 3 that we are in right now. We have been on this chapter for a while now because there are a lot of important teachings verses in this particular chapter where Krishna is talking about the nature of right action, this chapter of the Gita that is dedicated to Karma Yoga. This chapter started with Krishna explaining to Arjuna that inaction is not an option. Everybody has to act in the world. All beings are impelled from inside because of these three qualities, the three gunas that are inside of us. We are being pushed from inside to participate in this world, to act. And the circumstances where we find ourselves is our karma. We have attracted these particular situations in our own life because of our past actions, because of the energies that we have put out in our own past, both before and after our birth. And so everything we find ourselves in, all the specific relationships, the challenges, the circumstances, the tasks ahead of us, these are the exact things that we need in our own lives for our liberation. We have to follow this path that has been offered to us by Divine Mother in order to make spiritual progress. And not only that, we have to navigate these circumstances with a sense of self-offering. We have to offer the fruits of all our action back to Spirit at the feet of God. And that is the only way to not let the ego get attached to those fruits, because that is the root cause of all suffering. And last week we looked at this beautiful verse where Krishna was explaining to Arjuna, it is better to die doing one's own dharma, one's own duty unsuccessfully, rather than be successful or great in somebody else's duty. That is to say, this particular situation that we have created for ourselves, all the things that God has given to us specifically as our karma, as our dharma in this world, is exactly what we need in order to make spiritual progress. And at the end of this, we are reaching the end of chapter 3. Arjuna asks a question to Krishna. He asks, if it is so clear what we need to do in our life, if right action is already presented to us in our own life and all we need to do is navigate this world with a sense of self-offering and do what is our duty, why is it that we get confused? Why do we do things that are wrong? Now, it's a very fair question and an important one. And Krishna, in response to that question, gives this beautiful answer. He says, like fire obscured by smoke, like rust on a mirror, like the embryo encased in the womb, there are obstructions that cause us from perceiving the truth, and these are created by the three qualities. That's what Krishna is explaining to Arjuna. Now, I have mentioned this a few times before in this series, just my own just amazement at how beautiful these images are that are presented by the Gita, these metaphors, these images that are presented by these scriptures are so timeless and eternal. You know, like the tortoise pulling its limbs into its shell, like the land flooded with water, and what is the use of the well in that case? And in this particular verse, we are talking about three images. All three of them are very powerful and they have deep spiritual teachings in them, and that's what we are going to explore in this episode. To start with, I have to say, Krishna is describing the three obstructions that are holding us from perceiving truth, from performing what is right in this world. In a sense, although what he's talking about is karma, because these three obstructions, as we will see, are created by the three gunas, or the three qualities. Now, the three gunas are a central theme in the Bhagavad Gita. Anybody who has studied even a little bit of the Gita has heard about the three gunas. In this episode, I'll talk a little bit more about them. But I also have to say, Krishna dedicates a whole chapter, it's chapter 14 of the Bhagavad Gita, just to the discussion of these three gunas. So later on in this course, whenever we get to it, we'll also be looking at the three gunas in much greater detail. But in this discussion, it is coming up, so we will be looking at them and seeing what they mean to us in our life and how we are living through them. Now, as I was saying, Krishna is talking about the three categories of obstructions that hold us back from performing the right action. And these are caused by the three gunas, by the combination of these three qualities that is inside all of us, that is essentially within every being in creation. But these patterns, these qualities are not just accidents of nature. These are created by ourselves. These are things that we have ourselves set into motion through our past actions. And each one of us have a unique, I can say, a guna thumbprint or a guna footprint, which is that balance of the three gunas that is unique to us, that is inside of us, that we are working through. And that is our karmic footprint. That is the karma that we are carrying. So, in essence, these obstructions are caused by our own past actions, by the habit patterns that we have created in our own life, in our own consciousness. So, in essence, what we are looking at are three categories of karmic patterns that obstruct us from seeing what is right in our own life, from performing the right action as we navigate through life. Now, as I was saying, there are these three powerful images. Now, let's look at them one by one. And before I do that, let me also just introduce the three gunas. The three gunas are three qualities that are essential in all aspects of nature. And the three are, in Sanskrit, they are called sattva, rajas, and tamas. And sattva, the first guna, is often translated as the uplifting or the elevating quality. It is the purifying part of ourselves. Sattva is everything that is lifting up our spirit. Sattva is everything that is taking us away from affirming our own separate ego identity. All the things that are beautiful, that are spiritual, that are ennobling, they're all sattvic in nature. These three Sanskrit words have become such an integral part of the English dictionary because of how popular the Bhagavad Gita is. We use these English adjectives, sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic, to describe things that are filled with sattva, filled with that elevating quality, and also the other two qualities. Now, the second quality is rajas. Rajas is often translated as the activating quality. Again, I think in the second and the third chapter, Krishna has already made a couple of references, especially to rajas, or what he calls rajoguna. Rajas is that quality within us that impels us from inside, that draws us out into this world because of desires of the ego. It is that quality that affirms our ego identity, that makes us seek things of this world, that often makes us restless. Krishna, I think in one part where he is describing the downward spiral of how our consciousness gets caught in delusion, he talks about desire and anger and passion born out of the quality of rajas, because this quality of rajas activates us. It makes us imagine, it deludes us, thinking that all that we are seeking is out in this world, and it makes us nuts, looking for this and that, finding the next fulfillment in this world. Now, the third quality that Krishna is referring to in the Bhagavad Gita is called tamas. And tamas is the darkening or the dulling quality of consciousness. It is that quality which makes us think that our own fulfillment, our own satisfaction comes from lesser and lesser awareness. So the tamas quality, or the tamoguna, it is that in us that makes us lethargic, that makes us slow, that makes us sluggish, that is simply darkening. Now, all these three qualities are in essence aberrations from pure spirit. Rajas and tamas specifically are affirming the ego. As I was saying, Rajas pulls us out. It makes the ego restless. It makes us want to seek and do things in this world. Tamas, on the other hand, dulls our consciousness. It diminishes us, and it creates a dark aura around our own consciousness, obstructing us from having a clear vision of what is true and untrue. So these are the three qualities that we are dealing with all the time, and these are all a part of our own nature. Now, going back to the imagery in this verse, which is so beautiful and powerful, I have to say, if you have not heard this verse before, I would strongly recommend using these imageries in your daily life. I think all of us who are on this yogic path start doing that automatically, because these images are so helpful in navigating the situations in our own life. Let's look at the first one, the smoke obstructing the fire. Now, if it's not already evident to you, each one of these three images is referring to karma belong to each one of the three categories. Karma that is sattvic in nature, that is rajasic in nature, and tamasic in nature. Now, the first one is sattva, or the sattvic qualities within us that we have created through our own habits, and of course through the choices that we have made and are making every day in our own lives. And Krishna calls it smoke over fire, which is to say the smoke does not have any reality of its own. It's simply a reflection of the fire. Of course, it does obstruct the light, which is to say sattvic is still not the pure spirit. Now, this is a tricky idea for us to fully comprehend, because one would think if meditation and spirituality and all the right qualities that we want to develop in ourselves, if they are not affirming the ego, if they are taking us towards our own liberation, why are they obstructing knowledge? Why are they ignorance? Because in reality, that true light of spirit is beyond qualities. It is beyond right and wrong, vice and virtue. The pure liberated spirit is not limited by any quality. So as much as the sattvic quality is taking us in that direction, the quality in itself is not the same as an attribute of the spirit. That is why oftentimes, a common prayer that we chant to the Guru, which we call Hymn to Brahma, which is one that Yogananda ji often chanted and taught to his disciple. It starts with the word Brahmanandam. One of the adjectives used in that verse to describe the Guru is Three Guna Rahitam, or devoid of all the three gunas, which is to say the Guru is not just a good man. The Guru is not a kind man, which are all sattvic qualities, which are all attributes that we want to embody, which we want to be ourselves. I want to say it's not that the Guru is unkind. All I mean to say is the Guru is not merely a kind or a good person. A Guru is somebody, a liberated person, true wise soul, is someone who has transcended the distinction of goodness and badness. He is one that stands beyond the three qualities. All this to say that sattvic quality, wherever we are standing in our lives, unless I'm speaking to somebody who's completely self-realized, a sattvic quality is one that we want to develop, we want to draw into our life. But also, as Krishna explains in this verse, it is like smoke on the fire. It is not the same as the pure light of the Spirit, as the pure fire. It is simply an after effect. It is something that is created on top of the fire, which is capable of obstructing the fire itself when these habit patterns become limiting to our own mind. But at the end of the day, it is not something we have to worry about much. That is the essence of what Krishna is saying. Because just like you can let the smoke, we can get rid of the smoke just by a puff of air, similarly, sattvic guna, sattvic karma can easily be diminished. It can easily be gotten rid of without much effort. That is the first image that Krishna presents in this verse. And the second image Krishna presents is rust on a mirror. Now, this is different from smoke on the fire, because rust on the mirror is not just gotten rid of by a puff of air. It has to be worked upon. Now, like somebody was describing to me recently, rust on the mirror is actually not that easy to clean if you think about it. It is something that takes a lot of effort. It is something that you need to work on constantly. You have to put a lot of self-effort and will invest in it in order to get rid of it. And this is talking of all the rajasic karma that we hold in our own life, all the desires that impel us in this world. I'm seeking fulfillment in this. I would like this. I would not like that. I would like to have material security. I would like to have the ideal relationship in my life. I would like to go on a foreign trip. I would like to have this particular car or this kind of a house or whatever that is. All these desires that impel us out into the world, the things of our ego, what activates the restlessness within us, that is rajasic karma. Things that we have convinced ourselves through habit patterns is things that we think are the root, are the seeds for our own happiness. All this are the root of that rajasic karma. And how do we overcome them? They have to be overcome just like overcoming rust on a mirror, which is to say we have to work on them. We have to control our energies. Rajasic karma can only be overcome through effort. And what is that effort? The effort is self-constraint, the self-restraint. The effort is discipline, disciplining our mind, drawing our senses in, the practice of meditation, and all the other spiritual practices that we have to seek refuge in so that our mind is not constantly restless. So rajasic karma is one that we have to work on, the things that we find ourselves in our lives. Sometimes it is easy to even recognize the things that we are deluded by. We know that this particular desire for recognition or that particular desire to be seen a certain way, this particular desire for the ideal relationship is not truly the source of our happiness, but it is not easily dismissed. We have to work, we have to affirm, we have to practice our spiritual practices and constantly seek fulfillment in God alone. And gradually over time, the rust will come off the mirror. Now the third, and rather for me the most interesting karma, is the baby in the womb, the tamasic karma. Because when we are obstructed by that lethargy, by that darkening quality, by that dulling of the consciousness, Krishna is saying there's no easy way out. You just have to wait it out. Now, it is not often the most comforting advice, but the comforting part of it is the baby does come out of the womb. The baby cannot stay there forever. There is a time when that karma will come to an end. Now, it is perhaps in the simplest of scenarios easy to say what karma is rajasic, what karma is tamasic, and things like that. But I have to say, as we advance on the spiritual path, as our spiritual life becomes subtler and subtler, it is not always all that easy to say which category or which bucket the karma is falling into. Sometimes we are working on things without knowing whether they are rust on the mirror or baby in the womb. As I was saying in the beginning of this talk, as we integrate these images and ideas in our own daily lives, especially if you're practicing a yogic path, this become part of your common parlance. This is how we speak to each other when you're going through a difficult challenge. You talk to your friends wondering, I don't know, is this rust in the mirror or baby in the womb? We have to find out. And we really have to, because oftentimes the situations in life can be rather tricky or rather subtle for us to know or to recognize completely which bucket they fall into, which of these three karmas we are working with. Sometimes it is obvious. Oftentimes, once I was talking to a friend, he was describing a particular physical trait and a quality that he was struggling with, he has been struggling with for a significant period of time in his life. And he was telling me he's not all that upset about it. He has learned to accept it, but he also is realizing that this might just be the reality of this incarnation. And I was thinking of this verse from the Gita. Oftentimes we have traits in ourselves, personality traits that we have brought into this world that may or may not be spiritually serving us, but they might just be babies in the womb. Maybe we will overcome them in 20 years. Maybe we will overcome them in 2 or 3 incarnations. But we have to simply move through life, with acceptance, with that grace, knowing that this particular spiritual limitation, this particular trait in me need not hold me back. I can still, affirm the sattvic qualities in myself. I can still progress towards my own liberation. And we have to move through life with that patience. As a wise man once said, patience is the quickest route to God. So that's the quote I think of when I think of this third category of karma. When there's a baby in the womb, it's not going to come out in 8 months, and it's not going to stay there for 12 months. Another story that someone was sharing recently is when a devotee was going through a very, very difficult period of karma in their life. They sought Swami Kriyananda's counsel, and Swamiji, knowing all the different things happening in this man's life, he didn't know what else to say, but he gave some very wise advice. The first piece of advice that he gave this man was that all karma comes to an end, which is to say, whether it's smoke on the fire, whether it's rust on the mirror, or baby in the womb, it will eventually come to an end. They're all time bound. They are not the permanent realities of either the fire or the mirror or the baby. They all eventually transcend that limitation. They all are able to be released at some point. And essentially, since we are coming to an end in this episode, the true teaching that Krishna is presenting to us in all of this is that we don't really know what we are working with oftentimes. And all these different karmas, all these different qualities are obstructing us from being able to perceive truth clearly at all times, from being able to do what is right, and sometimes being misguided into wrong action. And the right way to live spiritual life, again, as Krishna affirms in this, is to offer this up. Now, this is the counterbalance to the idea Krishna is presenting to us in this verse, which is to say, all these three types of karma, as Krishna is describing, if you notice, he's talking about some kind of self-effort. In the first two, in Sattvic and Rajasic, the self-effort is actually putting our will and investing our energy into eradicating that karma. And in the third case, as he's saying, it's baby in the womb. So the effort is not going into eradicating it, but there is a significant effort, as most of us know, in enduring that karma. So in essence, Krishna is describing the self-effort that is needed for spiritual progress. But the counterbalance to this also is presented by the Gita, which is no matter what it is that is holding us back, no matter what karma that we bring into this life, what circumstances we find ourselves in, if we are able to completely offer it up to Krishna, if we are able to fully surrender and offer this at the feet of the divine, at the feet of God and Guru, the loss can be shifted. The loss can be changed, because that baby we are carrying in the womb is no longer ours. It need not limit us spiritually if we are able to give that baby back to Krishna, because then it still becomes karma, it still becomes a pattern of energy that eventually needs to find its resolution, but it will not hold us back because there's no ego attachment to it. Then grace can descend and liberate us, and it can free us from that ego detachment. None of these three types of karma need to hold us back from fully offering ourselves up to the divine. We can still navigate this world, we can still move through the circumstances of our life with that attitude of self-offering and with that attitude of nishkam karma that Krishna is describing in chapter 3. So I'm sure we will get to discuss more of the three gunas and other things in future verses as well. I'll meet you next week at another verse from the Gita. Until then, God